one thing I do see a lot of times is, someone identifies so much with their company. Maybe this is different because you're an entrepreneur, but I'll talk with someone who recently got laid off, and it's not just the loss of a job that's the issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's the loss of the security, the financial security. It's the loss of the reputation, because usually people get their reputation from their company or their work. It's the loss of the identity, because your job title was your identity. Oh, I was a marketing manager and now I'm unemployed, which is not an identity at all. It's just like a nothing, right? And so I'm sure this is very different for you, but where are there lines around like your identity as a person outside of your work, and or is work just kind of blended in and it's all encompassing, everything's kind of one thing?
It's not a good answer, but it's probably a little bit of both. I guess here's a tangible example I can give. There are people in my yoga community, right, who have taken my classes before, who don't really know that I do other stuff, right? And that's okay, because what's my relationship with them does not necessarily require that they know everything that I do, because that's not, their purpose for coming to a class that I teach is to take a yoga class and get the benefits of that. So they don't need to know my life story in that process. Now, sometimes I will weave in life experiences into those classes, and I'll talk about, oh, this happened at my job, or I'll say like, oh, so I run a business, a consulting business, and this happened today, right? So that might get peppered in. And then if they want to like follow me on Instagram later, they might see my stuff through there. But I'm not sitting there being like, oh no, this student left this class and doesn't know that I do 3 other things. I've lost. I've sacrificed my personality here. I'm like, you can know the domain that makes sense, but I'm also not actively hiding anything from the other things either. If you take a workshop with Startup Hypeman, slide 3 is like, who am I? It's like hype man, rapper, yogi. And everyone gets to know that. And but they don't need to know like the extent of the yoga classes I teach if you take a workshop, right? Because that's not what you're there for. So it's like, you don't have to know every part of me, but it doesn't mean I'm not bringing my full self to the table. And I might mention it, or just like, if you get to know my personality, you'll get to a point where you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. You'd probably do that too. Hadn't thought of it before, but now that you tell me, it makes sense.
Especially, I think early on in people's careers, they are still in the exploration phase, right? Like before you started taking yoga classes, there were other aspects that were similar to yoga. Like I know you meditated and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then on the other side of it, there might be, if you really were to sit down and write everything that you do down, like you cook, like, right? You meditate, like that intro slide could be endless, right? If we really sat down. And so there's no way to encompass everything anyway. So it's good to have those healthy boundaries, but also not be hiding. Because I think that's one of the hardest parts that you and I encountered at work. I don't want to speak for you, but when I was at work, like there were a lot of rules around what you can and can't put online outside of your job, and what you can share and what you can't share. And so it seemed as though the work was overreaching into people's personal lives and saying like, you can't. I think that's changed in the years. Like, they went from not casual Fridays to casual Fridays to just everything's casual. So maybe things have changed. But yeah, I think that there's so much in there of like figuring out what your identity is. And so what were some of the things that helped you along the way kind of integrate those pieces? Were they always perfectly integrated, or were there moments where you felt like you had to keep everything compartmentalized?
No, I definitely used to feel like I was siloed out. And I'll tell you, like, so like my previous work experience working for someone else was not like what you said. Like I felt like very comfortable being myself, and I didn't feel like restricted really. And it's funny because now one of my product offerings with Startup Hypeman is making rap songs for other companies to promote their brand. And it only occurred to me like last week that version 1.0 of that was actually my first company when we rolled out a new product just for internal purposes. Like at our company kickoff meeting, I like performed this, like I did like a remix of LL Cool J's Mama Said Knock You Out, but I made it about this product we had made. And I just performed that for like the 40 people at like our, like our sales team meeting at the beginning of the year. And that was actually a version 1.0 of it. And I totally forgot I had done that. but that was my groundwork that was laid. And at that point, when I'm like, 23 years old or whatever, I'm not thinking, oh, I can do anything more with this. I'm not doing it, but I'm just not in the place in life yet where I'm like, oh, what's an interesting idea? Selling this as a product to other companies. And it took me, until this last year to even think of doing that at all as a sellable product. But the groundwork was laid 8-9 years ago. And some of these things, it's interesting. It's like, it's not a good answer, but like some of these things just take time and experience. And because even though I felt like myself at that company, I also didn't have the confidence to say, oh, I'm going to go out and do this now. Or felt like it was like an allowable thing to do, more or less. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think you just need some reps, or you need some swings in the batting cage, if you will, at some of this stuff. And I used, on that point of like the identity stuff, I think it was only in the last, I'd say 3-4 years that I really stepped into that like reconciliation of my identities to say, oh, this is who I am, and these are all the things that I do. And that was an important step for me, because it just kind of like enabled everything. It made everything easier when I just owned it all. And I said, yes, this is all me. And I was doing a degree of it before, but not enough of it to be able to really like rest easy with everything. I don't know if that made it harder to understand or not.
That makes perfect sense to me. So I hope it resonates. If it didn't, let us know. But there's so much in there. And I think it brings me to the next part here, which is like moving forward. How do you see this stuff evolving? Because, we can't help ourselves of thinking what the future is going to be, right? So, as you think ahead and you picture my life as a series of projects, I want to integrate these different aspects. I want to let them have space to breathe and to grow before they get pushed to spot number one and all that different stuff. Where do you sort of think about, what do you sort of view life as if there is no retirement? What is there? What does it look like? Because I think a lot of people just never have thought, well, I feel like a lot of people our age are like, I'm not going to be allowed to retire because Social Security's gone and all this other BS. But that's more like coming from a negative place, right? There's not really been a lot of rhetoric around what. There's like two extremes. Tim Ferriss says, have a retirement every year when you blah, blah, blah. And then there's the other side, which is work your ass off until you retire. So is there like a middle ground that you're striving for? Or what does that sort of healthy view of a working retirement look like to you?
Yeah. And I don't want to like people to mishear this and think like, don't contribute to your retirement account, because that is not the point here. Like, definitely do that. Build up a nest egg and build up a retirement egg. But to me, the idea is I'm not trying to build a career that I am supposed to retire from or feel this desire to retire from. I think like the people who are most satisfied very often are the ones who, they work until they die. I mean, and work looks different, right? They're not working 70-hour weeks when they die, but they're doing something that still satisfies them. And they're not like, they didn't work 30 plus years to be able to say, well, now I don't have to work anymore. And that's the mindset that I'm on here, right? Like in the same way that an author will just keep writing books, or an actor will, Joe Pesci can be in Goodfellas at age like 30 something, but then he can also play the role of like older guy when he's 80 something. Or, take whomever, Meryl Streep, whatever you want. These are all people who they're not like, I'm a retired actor now, so I'm not acting anymore. Because a new project comes along and they say, yeah, that's interesting. It's a good use of my talents and time. So why don't I pursue that? That's just kind of, and I haven't like crystallized it any more than that. That's the way I look at my career unfolding, is a series of projects. And again, I'll collect retirement income at some point. I'm not talking about the financial side of things. I'm talking about the work side of things. I am not saying, how do I bust my ass for 30 years so that I don't have to bust my ass anymore? It's, how do I do meaningful work for 30 years so I can do meaningful work for another 30 years and more?